The auditorium lights softened everything except the empty seats. Row 12, Section C, 3 chairs I'd reserved weeks ago with my parents' names carefully written on the confirmation email. They stayed empty through the entire ceremony. Not because of traffic, not because of illness, but because my sister Maddie had a meltdown about her boyfriend canceling their weekend trip, and apparently, that emergency outranked 4 years of my life. I read the text while holding my diploma in one hand and my composure in the other. Sorry, sweetie, Maddie really needs us right now. We'll celebrate when you get home. I didn't respond. I just stood there in my cap and gown, watching other families swarm their graduates with flowers and cameras, while I calculated exactly how much silence I'd swallowed over the years. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Before I tell you what I did next, let me ask you something. Where are you listening from? And have you ever felt invisible in your own family? Because that's where this story really begins. Growing up as Maddie's older sister felt like living in someone else's shadow, except the shadow was brighter than you'd ever be. She was the family star, the one whose tantrums became family emergencies, whose wants became everyone's priorities. I learned early that my role was to be the easy one, the one who didn't need attention, the one who figured things out alone. When I was 14, I won a regional writing competition. My English teacher called it exceptional. My parents said that's nice and spent the rest of dinner discussing Maddie's upcoming dance recital. When I was 16, I got accepted into a prestigious summer program for young journalists. My mother's first response was, "But who'll watch Maddie while we're at the beach house?" I didn't go to that program. I stayed home and watched my sister complain about being bored for 3 weeks straight. College became my escape. I moved 6 hours away to Seattle, found work-study positions, took out loans, and built a life that was entirely mine. My parents visited twice in 4 years, both times because they were already in the city for Maddie's various crises. A bad breakup. A roommate dispute. Once, they drove up because she needed help picking out a couch. They stayed in a hotel, helped her shop, then drove home without stopping by my campus. I stopped expecting them to show up. Expectations breed disappointment, and I'd learned to function without either. But graduation felt different. It was the finish line of something I'd done entirely on my own. Surely, I thought, this would be the one milestone they wouldn't miss. I sent them the date 4 months in advance. I called to confirm 2 months out. I texted them the week before with the seat numbers. They promised. They said they wouldn't miss it for anything. The morning of graduation, my phone buzzed at 6 a.m. A text from my mother. Maddie's really upset. Jake canceled their Napa trip. She's not handling it well. We need to be here for her. I stared at that message for a long time. Maddie was 21, fully employed, living in her own apartment that my parents helped pay for. She was upset about a wine country vacation. And that was more important than my college graduation. I typed and deleted 5 different responses before settling on okay. Just that. One word. Because what else was there to say? Explaining wouldn't change anything. Anger wouldn't make them come. I'd spent 24 years learning that lesson. The ceremony itself passed in a blur. My name was called. I walked across the stage. I shook hands with the dean. People clapped. I smiled. And the whole time, those 3 empty seats in row 12 felt like a neon sign broadcasting exactly where I stood in my family's hierarchy. Afterward, my roommate Claire found me sitting alone near the parking lot, still in my gown. She didn't ask if I was okay. She just sat down beside me and said, "My mom made extra lasagna. You're coming home with us." I spent that evening with Claire's family in their cramped apartment that smelled like garlic and warmth. Her mother kept refilling my plate. Her father asked about my job prospects. Her little brother showed me his Pokemon cards. And I realized something I'd been avoiding for years. Family wasn't the people you shared DNA with. Family was the people who showed up. I drove back to my apartment that night with a clarity I'd never felt before. For the first time, I wasn't sad. I wasn't angry. I was done. Not in the explosive, dramatic way you see in movies. In the quiet, certain way you feel when you finally stop lying to yourself. The plan formed over the next 3 days. Clean, simple, irreversible. I'd saved money from my work-study jobs and a small inheritance from my grandmother, money my parents didn't know about. I'd already accepted a job offer in Portland, starting in 2 weeks. All I needed to do was move my timeline up. And tell no one. I spent a week packing my apartment in careful silence. Every book, every piece of clothing, every memory that mattered got boxed and labeled. I arranged for a moving company to pick everything up on a Thursday morning. I transferred my mail. I updated my address with the bank. I cleaned the place until it looked like I'd never lived there at all. My parents called twice during that week. Once to say they'd make it up to me with a dinner when I got home. Once to ask if I could help Maddie move some furniture the following weekend. I said I'd let them know. I never called back. On Wednesday night, I drove to their house in Tacoma. They weren't home. Maddie was out with friends. I used my key to slip inside, moving through rooms that had never quite felt like mine. I left my house key on the kitchen counter with a note underneath. Just 4 words, I'm starting over. Loretta. No explanation. No accusations. No drama. Just a boundary drawn so clearly they couldn't pretend to misunderstand. I took one last look at the family photos lining the hallway. Maddie's graduation, Maddie's dance recitals, Maddie's birthday parties. I appeared in maybe 3 of the 20 frames, always in the background, always slightly out of focus. I left without crying. I'd done all my crying years ago. By Thursday afternoon, I was in Portland, unpacking boxes in a small studio apartment with exposed brick and windows that let in actual sunlight. My phone started ringing around 6 p.m. My mother. Then my father. Then Maddie. Then my mother again. I let every call go to voicemail. I needed silence to hear my own thoughts for once. The voicemails started confused. Loretta, where are you? Your note doesn't make sense. Then they turned concerned. Sweetie, call us back. We're worried. Then frustrated. This is ridiculous. You can't just disappear without telling us what's wrong. But I could. And I did. 3 days passed before I listened to the messages. My mother's voice cracked on the 5th one. I don't understand why you're doing this. We love you. We've always supported you. I almost laughed. Support. The word felt like a foreign language, something they'd learned to pronounce, but never understood the meaning of. Maddie's message was different. Angry. You're being so dramatic, Loretta. Mom and Dad feel terrible. I needed them that day, and you're making this all about you. That message I did laugh at. Making it all about me. After 24 years of making everything about her. I didn't respond to any of them. Silence, I'd learned, was the most honest answer I could give. The first week in Portland felt surreal. I started my job at a small publishing house, the kind of place that smelled like old paper and ambition. My coworkers were kind without being invasive. My boss appreciated my work without needing me to shrink myself. For the first time in my life, I existed in a space where I wasn't defined by what I didn't get. But the real shift happened 2 weeks in. I was sitting in a coffee shop editing a manuscript when my phone rang. An unknown Seattle number. I almost didn't answer. Then something made me pick up. Loretta. A woman's voice, professional but warm. This is Patricia Hollis from the Seattle Arts Foundation. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. My mind went blank. The Seattle Arts Foundation had featured my essay collection in their Emerging Writers Showcase 3 months ago, a project I'd submitted on a whim and mostly forgotten about. No, this is fine, I managed. Wonderful. I'm calling because your collection has been nominated for the Harper Grant. It's a $50,000 award for emerging literary talent. The committee was incredibly impressed with your work. The world tilted. $50,000. Recognition. Validation for something I'd created while my family barely noticed I was writing at all. I don't know what to say. Say you'll attend the ceremony in 3 weeks, Patricia laughed. And bring someone who believed in you from the start. We love celebrating those connections. I agreed, thanked her, and sat in that coffee shop for another hour, staring at nothing and everything. Someone who believed in me from the start. The first person who came to mind was Claire's mother, who'd fed me lasagna and asked nothing in return. That night, I finally broke my silence. I sent one text to my mother. I won a $50,000 writing grant. I thought you should know I'm doing fine. I didn't send it out of spite. I sent it because I wanted them to understand what they'd missed while they were busy handling Maddie's latest crisis. She called immediately. I didn't answer. She texted, "Loretta, that's amazing. We need to talk." Please. But we didn't need to talk. Talking implied there was something left to save. There wasn't. There was just distance now, clean and necessary. The grant ceremony happened 3 weeks later in a restored theater in downtown Seattle. Claire came with me, and her mother, and even her little brother, who was mostly excited about the free appetizers. When they announced my name and I walked onto that stage, I looked out at the audience and saw the faces of people who'd chosen to show up. Not because they had to, because they wanted to. The empty seats didn't haunt me anymore. They'd been replaced. After the ceremony, my phone lit up with texts from extended family. Congratulations from cousins I barely knew. My aunt sent a paragraph about how proud she was. And then, at the bottom of the list, a message from my mother. "Your father and I would like to take you to dinner. We need to talk about some things." I read it twice. Then I typed back, "I'm not ready for that yet. Maybe someday, but not today." It felt good to say no. It felt powerful to set a boundary without guilt chasing after it. Months passed. The grant money let me take a writing leave from my job. I worked on a novel about sisters who couldn't find their way back to each other. It was fiction mostly, but the emotional truth bled through every page. My editor said it was the most honest thing she'd read in years. Maddie reached out once, 6 months after I'd left. A long email about how she'd been in therapy and realized some things. About how she hadn't meant to take up so much space. About how she missed me. I believed that she meant it. But meaning it and changing were different things. I wrote back, not with anger, but with clarity. I told her I loved her, but I couldn't go back to being the person who disappeared so she could shine. I told her I needed distance to figure out who I was without constantly bending around her needs. I told her maybe someday we could build something different. But it would have to be equal. She never responded. And that was okay too. My parents sent a card on my 25th birthday. Inside was a check for $5,000 and a note. "We know we can't make up for missing your graduation. We know we weren't there the way we should have been. We're trying to understand. We hope you can forgive us someday." I didn't cash the check. Forgiveness wasn't something you could buy. It was something you earned through change, through showing up, through years of different choices. Maybe they'd make those choices. Maybe they wouldn't. Either way, I'd learned to build a life that didn't hinge on their approval. Looking back now, I don't regret leaving the way I did. Quiet. Final. Without a scene. Some people think you need a big confrontation to reclaim your life. But sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply stop participating in a story that was never about you. My parents missed my graduation to handle my sister's meltdown. And in doing so, they gave me something unexpected. Permission to choose myself. Permission to walk away from a pattern that had been breaking me slowly for 24 years. These days, I live in a small house in Portland with a garden I tend on weekends. Claire visits once a month. My coworkers have become friends. I'm writing a second novel. And when people ask about my family, I tell them the truth. It's complicated. But I'm not. I'm just someone who learned, finally, that showing up for yourself is just as important as showing up for others. Maybe more. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, I want you to know something. You're not dramatic for wanting to be seen. You're not selfish for needing space. And you're not broken for choosing distance over dysfunction. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is leave room for yourself to breathe. 3 years after my graduation, I got an email from my father. Short, honest, raw. "I watched you walk across that stage on the university's website. The recording's still up. I saw you look at our empty seats. I'm sorry, Loretta. I'm so sorry." I read it sitting in my garden with coffee going cold in my hands. And for the first time since that graduation day, I cried. Not from pain, from release. I wrote back the next morning. "Thank you for saying that. I'm not ready to rebuild yet. But I'm glad you finally saw me. It wasn't closure. It wasn't forgiveness. It was just honest. And honest was the best thing we'd ever been with each other. As for Maddie, we haven't spoken in 3 years. I don't hate her. I don't wish her harm. I just don't have space in my life for someone who needs me to be smaller so they can feel bigger. Maybe that will change. Maybe it won't. But I've learned that family isn't just the people who share your blood. It's the people who show up, who see you, who celebrate your wins without making them about someone else's loss. My graduation was supposed to be the end of one chapter. Instead, it became the beginning of the only chapter that ever really mattered. The one where I finally chose myself. If this story resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments. And if you've ever had to leave to find yourself, know that you're not alone. Subscribe for more stories about choosing yourself when no one else will. Sometimes the most radical act of love is the one you give yourself.